Here's the big question we're tackling today. Was Pakistan a brilliant mediator, the architect behind a crucial US-Iran ceasefire? Or were they just a postman, simply delivering a message from Washington? We're about to dive into two completely opposite, totally conflicting stories about one of the biggest diplomatic events of the year.
So let's kick things off with this really powerful quote from Michael Kugelman, a well-known scholar on South Asian affairs. And it just perfectly sums up one side of the story, the idea that Pakistan managed to pull off an incredibly complex, high-stakes diplomatic win, basically averting a regional catastrophe. So the question is, how did they supposedly pull this off?
All right, let's dive into that first story, the one where Pakistan emerges as this surprising but very effective peacemaker. Now, according to outlets like Dawn, this wasn't some fluke. Nope. This was the result of some really intense, behind-the-scenes diplomacy.
Okay, so this timeline really lays it all out. And what's crazy is just how fast Pakistan moved. You could see, right after the conflict kicks off on February 28th, they're already activating these quiet diplomatic channels. And we're not talking about just one phone call. This was a sustained effort, from hosting foreign ministers at the end of March to actually circulating a whole ceasefire framework in early April. And it all led to that big announcement on April 7th.
And get this wasn't just Pakistan patting itself on the back. The whole diplomatic success story got a huge boost from all over the world. You had Western observers, big regional players like Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and of course, their ally China, all publicly praising the effort. And as the scholar Vali Nasr pointed out, getting Lebanon included in the deal was a massive, unexpected win that, honestly, a lot of people thought was just impossible.
Okay, but what if that whole story, that whole diplomatic masterstroke, was just that? A story. A charade, even. Let's pivot now to a completely different take on what happened. One that says this wasn't a win at all, but a carefully scripted performance. Right, now let's flip the script completely and look at the counter-narrative, the mediation mockery. In this version of events, Pakistan isn't some skilled negotiator. No, they're either an irrelevant player who just got lucky, or worse, a puppet. And you better believe this viewpoint is argued just as passionately as the first one.
And while this slide just lays that divide bare, on one side, you've got Pakistan's Dawn newspaper celebrating what it calls one of the biggest diplomatic wins in years. And on the other, India's Republic World is calling it a mediation mockery. It's literally the same event, but you're getting two totally different realities presented to the public.
And this skepticism wasn't coming from just one place. It was a whole chorus of voices. The Israeli ambassador to India came right out and said, "We don't trust Pakistan." A US think tank, the FDD, went even further, calling Pakistan a dishonest broker that was basically acting as Iran's lawyer. And then you have the Indian media, which just dismissed them as a postman, someone who just carries messages with no real power or influence of their own.
And what really poured gasoline on this postman theory was this one specific incident that Republic World reported on. They claimed that the Pakistani Prime Minister's social media post about the ceasefire accidentally included a draft note, suggesting the whole thing was scripted by the White House. For anyone arguing Pakistan was just a puppet for the US, this was like their smoking gun.
So, you have to ask yourself, why are these two stories so powerful and so completely at odds? Well, to get that, you've got to understand what was really at stake. For the major players in the region, this wasn't some abstract chess game. No, this was a potential existential threat.
I mean, just look at the motivations here. The stakes couldn't be higher. For Pakistan, a war right next door could mean total economic chaos. For India, the risks were just as huge. A conflict could cut off something like 90% of its oil imports and mess with billions in trade. And on top of all that, India's got this tricky BRICS presidency to manage, trying to keep the peace in a group that has rivals like Iran and Saudi Arabia in it.
So, with the stakes this incredibly high, it's no shock that the media plays a gigantic role in all of this. It's a full-on war of words. Let's actually break down the specific, loaded language that different outlets were using to frame this whole thing.
The language, you guys, is everything. In Pakistan, Dawn is using these grand words like historic moment and wisdom to paint a picture of a capable, sovereign nation. But then you jump over to India, and Republic World is throwing around terms like bootlicking and postman to frame Pakistan as nothing more than a US proxy. Meanwhile, the FDD is calling them a dishonest broker. This isn't just reporting news, right? This is building a narrative, brick by brick.
So, how can both of these things be true? How can a country be a hero in one story and a total fool in another? The answer is all about how these narratives get built and the filters they pass through.
It's like a machine, really. Check this out.
First, you have the event itself, the complicated diplomacy. Then, that event gets passed through these massive filters, historical rivalries, economic needs, political alliances. And that's when the media steps in, cherry-picking facts and using that loaded language to create a story that'll click with their audience. And the result? Boom. You get two opposing truths that both feel completely real to the people reading them.
And this is maybe the most important takeaway of all. There's the actual diplomatic work that happened, in quiet rooms and on secure phone lines. And then there's the public war for perception. It's like Pakistan was fighting on two fronts at the same time. Whether it actually had influence is one question, but whether the world believes it had influence, that's a whole other battle.
And that leaves us with this massive, kind of mind-bending question to think about. In the world of global diplomacy, where what people believe can be just as powerful as what's real, which one actually matters more? What really happened, or the story we all end up believing?